Welcome back to AM Northwest. Our next guest followed in his late father, Tim Russert's footsteps, becoming an award-winning journalist covering American politics. But he began to wonder why he was chasing his father's legacy and set out on a globe-spanning journey to find himself. Here to share his memoir, Look for Me There, we welcome author Luke Russert. Good to have you with us, Luke. How you doing?
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
You bet. Talk to me about the title, Look for Me There.
It comes from a baseball game I went to with my father in Baltimore, Maryland when I was 9 years old. And we were walking in the concourse of the stadium, and there was a crush of people. He was holding my hand, and we got separated. And I fell behind him about 10 or 15 yards. He never lost sight of me, and he came running back through the crowd of people, put his hand around my shoulder, clasped my other hand, wrist with his other hand, and he said something, "Hey, buddy, if we're ever separated, just look for me there." And he pointed to a hot dog stand with an Oriole bird on it. And he pulled me in and said, "Hey, but we'll never be separated."
Yeah.
And when I was trying to come up for a title, it just fit because it was organic. It was something he used to say to me when he was picking me up from a rock concert at the airport, pre-cell phone era, landmark. And I realized that for a lot of my life after he passed, I was looking for him, looking for his approval to be my own person. And so I cataloged that in the book.
You were 22 when he passed unexpectedly. Tell me about what you were thinking in that moment and how you had to get to the funeral and make the eulogy. Tell me about that experience.
Oh, you know, when he passed away, I was 3 weeks out of college. I was this happy-go-lucky kid, wanted to perhaps do a gap year, some traveling, and then start studying for grad school. I thought I was going to be an international relations master's. That's what I wanted to do. And he passed away, and I gave a eulogy that was televised, and a lot of people saw that and said, you know, you have the same skill set that Tim had. You have that ability to connect with folks. You have the sparkle in your eye. And I felt this sort of duty to keep his legacy alive and go into the broadcast journalism field. But it was something when I made the decision, it was really, you know, the greatest cure for misery is hard work. So I would throw myself into that hard work. But by doing that, I never really processed the grief of losing him. I think I kind of never really wanted to get away from that 22-year-old Luke in that moment, because if I did, then Dad would be really gone. So that was something I stored and ignored and didn't really focus on until years later. And I'm thankful I did, but it's a journey.
Well, and when you were giving the eulogy, you were speaking in front of some incredible people in the audience who admired your father. I mean, that had to be pressure too.
I thank you for bringing that up. 22 years old, you just graduated from college, and now you're looking out over church pews with Barack Obama and John McCain and Ethel Kennedy and Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, it was something where people said, "Where did that eulogy come from?" And I go, part of it was Dad talking to me, divine intervention, I call it. But I think what that was the first step in was it instilled this sort of responsibility of living for him. And that's what I was supposed to do. And I did that for a number of years. But ultimately, if you're living for somebody else all the time, you're not living for yourself, it's going to catch up to you.
So you went traveling. And what did you learn? You talk about being vulnerable and how important that is. Tell me about what you learned 3 years traveling.
The most important thing that traveling teaches you is to be comfortable in uncertainty. And when you leave the bubble or leave the world that you know, and you're suddenly thrown in these far-flung places where you don't know the language, you don't know the customs that well, you really have to put forward the best version of yourself, the most respectful version of yourself, and the most understanding version of yourself. And it was a wonderful experience for me because I got to have moments of deep introspection where I became comfortable in uncertainty, and through being comfortable in uncertainty, I became more comfortable processing grief and more comfortable looking inward and being vulnerable. I think a lot of young men, especially I played football for 8 years in middle school and high school, and baseball, there's always this idea of, you know, stay strong and be tough. And I agree with that. There's an element of that that works a lot in life. But we also have to open ourselves up and look inward and be mindful of the feelings that we're having, because there's a reason. And it's okay to explore that.
It has to be tough. He was your best friend. And you have to hear him sometimes or feel his presence sometimes, think he's coming around the corner sometimes. Does that still happen?
Yeah, and I'm highly happy you asked that question, because I think that was something that I needed to get comfortable with. You know, for a number of years, I would choke up when I heard his voice on tape or audio. I'm very fortunate to have his own book recorded. He recorded it and read it himself. So there's all these wonderful messages to me, literally, that are taped. But I got to a place where I don't find sadness in that. I find joy in hearing my buddy again, and I love it. Yeah.
What is your relationship like with your mom?
It's good. And, one of the things I always say is that when you have a loss, the relationship with the other parent changes dramatically. You know, my mother is a writer for Vanity Fair, and growing up, there was always this sort of good cop, bad cop. She was more the disciplinarian, and I didn't really understand why she was so hard on me growing up. And it wasn't until I traveled with her one-on-one. The first time we ever took a mother-son trip, I was in my 30s. I really regret that. I went to countless ball games and political conventions with Dad. But I started to travel with her, and I saw that she was this very strong-willed, tough-spirited woman that had never been handed anything in her life, was a Peace Corps volunteer. And part of the reason that she was hard on me in my own mind growing up was that she wanted what was best for me. She wanted me to know that there was a world outside of a bubble, and you got to be tough, and you have to understand that we have to have empathy and understand how the world works. And so once I got to sort of see her independent of the role of mom and understand who she was and her origin story more, our relationship got a lot better, because I go, okay, I understand all those things you were saying to me when I was a young kid, especially as a teenager, maybe tuning you out.
Yeah. We want to tell our viewers the book again is titled Look for Me There. Luke Russert, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. All right, we'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.